My name is Jaylene Goodwin. I'm 24, living in a quiet Oregon suburb, working as a junior architect. This Thanksgiving, I walked into my parents' house holding flowers and my mom's favorite pie, hoping things would finally be peaceful. Instead, my dad's face hardened. My sister whispered behind her glass. Then he pointed straight at me and yelled, "You're not welcome here, Jaylene. You're a disgrace to this family." The room went silent. I stood frozen at the doorway, pie shaking in my hands. What would you do if your own family humiliated you in front of everyone? I didn't even know how long I stood there. The laughter died, replaced by that heavy silence that swallows everything. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat louder than the clock ticking on the wall. The pie plate slipped a little in my hand, and a small crack spread across the glass edge. I was 24, but at that moment, I felt like I was 10 again, scared, small, and desperate to make them love me. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air, mixed with cinnamon candles and fake cheer. My mom avoided my eyes. My sister Clara smirked behind her wine glass, perfectly composed in her beige cashmere sweater, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Her husband shifted awkwardly beside her, staring at his plate as if he could disappear into the mashed potatoes. "Dad, please," I whispered, trying to steady my voice. "I just came to wish you happy Thanksgiving." "You shouldn't have," he barked, his voice slicing through the air like broken glass. "You've embarrassed this family enough. You think you can just walk in here after everything you've done?" My chest tightened. Everything I've done. The words stabbed deeper because I wasn't even sure what they meant anymore. Was it because I moved out? Because I chose architecture instead of the family business? Because I refused to pretend we were a perfect little dynasty? I looked toward my mom, hoping she'd say something, anything, but she just sipped her wine, eyes glistening like she might cry, yet her lips stayed sealed. That hurt more than my father's voice. Silence from someone who once brushed your hair when you were sick is worse than any insult. I wanted to drop the pie right there to let it shatter and splatter across the expensive rug. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry if I ruined dinner," and turned toward the door. The room didn't stop me. No one said, "Wait." No one said we didn't mean it. I walked out into the freezing Oregon air, my breath visible in little bursts of white. The front door shut behind me with a thud that felt like a lifetime closing. I stood on the porch for a moment, clutching the pie to my chest like it was the last piece of hope I had. Then the tears came, hot and ugly. I placed the pie gently on the steps, not wanting to drop it anymore. It wasn't the pie's fault. I turned toward my car, my vision blurred by tears and headlights from neighbors arriving for their own happy dinners. Their laughter echoed faintly, blending with the crunch of leaves under my boots. Inside my car, I wiped my face with my sleeve, smearing mascara. The rearview mirror reflected someone I barely recognized, eyes red, lips trembling, hair tangled by the wind. I didn't know if I was angry or broken. Maybe both. I sat there for a long time, replaying his words over and over. "You're not welcome here, you're a disgrace." How many times had he said that to me before? Too many to count. I used to think if I worked harder, dressed nicer, made more money, maybe he'd stop saying it. Maybe he'd see me. But tonight I realized something brutal. Nothing I do will ever be enough. My phone buzzed, a message from Clara. Just 2 words. "Grow up." I laughed bitterly. It wasn't even worth replying. She'd always been the golden one, the one who got the praise, the family company, the trust fund, the perfect life. And me, I was the mistake they wished they could erase. I drove away, the radio playing softly, some love song I couldn't listen to. The farther I went from that house, the lighter my chest felt, but the ache didn't fade. It stayed, quiet and steady, like a bruise under my ribs. When I reached my apartment, I sat in the dark for a while. The place was small but mine. I ran my fingers along the desk, cluttered with sketches and models for the community center project I'd been working on. Architecture had always been my escape, the only thing that made sense when everything else didn't. I thought about calling someone, an old friend, maybe my ex, but what would I say? That my own family threw me out of Thanksgiving again? That I still stupidly hoped this year would be different? No, I didn't want pity. I changed into sweatpants, curled up on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. My phone lit up once more, a voicemail from my mom. My heart jumped, but when I played it, her voice was flat, distant. "Jaylene, next time, maybe give us some notice before you show up. You know how your father gets." That was it. No apology, no love, just justification. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Then, for the first time in years, I whispered out loud, "Maybe I should stop trying." But even as I said it, a small part of me refused to believe it. Some quiet voice inside whispered, "They don't get to define you anymore." I didn't know it yet, but that thought, the smallest spark of defiance, was the start of everything that would come next. That night, as I drifted to sleep, I dreamed of my grandfather's old house. The creak of the wooden stairs, the smell of paint and sawdust, the warmth I hadn't felt in years. When I woke up, I didn't realize that house would soon become the battleground for everything I'd ever lost. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and that heavy, sour feeling you get after crying too hard. The Oregon rain hadn't stopped all night, and now it tapped softly against my window like it was trying to remind me the world outside still existed. I stared at the gray sky for a long time before forcing myself to move. I made coffee, but it tasted like ashes. Everything did lately. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I looked around, architectural models half finished, drawings spread on the table, empty takeout boxes stacked near the sink. My life was small but mine. I'd built it brick by brick after walking away from my family, yet part of me still wanted their approval like a child craving a parent's smile. That's the worst part of toxic families. You never stop hoping they'll change, even when they've proven 1,000 times they won't. I scrolled through my phone trying to distract myself when a notification popped up from an old email thread I hadn't seen in years. Goodwin estate transfer notice. For a moment I thought it was spam. Then I saw the subject line, property sale 212 Maple Hill Lane. My breath caught. Maple Hill Lane. Grandpa's house. I clicked it open, my hands trembling. It was a notification from a real estate firm. Apparently, the family trust had approved the sale of the Goodwin estate, my grandfather's home, the one he'd built himself, the one he'd always told me I'd inherit one day. My coffee went cold as I stared at the email. I could still see that house in my mind, white siding, blue shutters, the huge oak tree out front where Grandpa hung a swing just for me. Every summer, I'd stay there while my parents were too busy to take me on vacation. He'd let me help him sketch floor plans and carve little wooden models of houses. He'd say, "You've got an architect's heart, Jaybird. Always build something that outlives the pain." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. He died 3 years ago and the family had handled everything. I was never even shown the will. Dad told me Grandpa kept things simple and left it all to the family trust. I believed him because I wanted peace. But seeing that email now, something inside me shifted. Why would they sell that house, his house, without telling me? I called the number listed in the email, pretending to be a buyer. The agent on the other end was polite, too polite. "Oh yes, the Maple Hill property is in high demand. It's owned by the Goodwin Trust. The paperwork is handled through Clara Goodwin, your sister, I believe." My blood ran cold. Clara, of course. I thanked the agent and hung up, staring at the phone like it might explode. My sister, the golden child, was selling the one piece of our family that ever meant something real. I thought about all those years she'd mocked me for clinging to the past. Maybe that's why she never liked Grandpa. He saw through her shine. My mind spun back to the funeral. I remembered standing beside the casket, holding his old sketchbook. I'd found it in his workshop, with his handwriting scrawled inside. "To my granddaughter Jaylene, who builds what others only dream." Dad had taken it from me right there, saying it was just sentimental clutter. I never saw it again. I clenched my jaw, anger slowly rising like heat under my skin. I opened my laptop and started digging through my files, old messages, photos, legal documents I'd once scanned just in case. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for until I found it, a blurred photo of a will. I'd taken it years ago, the night before the funeral, when Grandpa had shown me something important. It was just one page, but I could still read the words. "To my first granddaughter, Jaylene Goodwin, I leave the property at 212 Maple Hill Lane." I stared at it, my pulse pounding. My name, my inheritance, my right. And yet the house was being sold under Clara's authority. I dropped my face into my hands, shaking with disbelief. They'd lied, again, my father, my mother, my perfect sister. They'd erased me from the family not just emotionally, but legally. For a long moment, I sat there in silence, staring at the rain sliding down the window like tiny trails of betrayal. Then I whispered to myself, "Not this time." I grabbed my phone and called the only person who might know what to do, Mason Reed. We'd gone to college together, both studying architecture, but Mason had gone into real estate law instead. He still sent me birthday memes sometimes. He answered on the second ring. "Jaylene? Wow, hey. Haven't heard from you since? Mason, I need your help." I cut him off, my voice shaking. "It's about my grandfather's house. I think my family's trying to sell it illegally." There was a pause on the line. "Okay, breathe, tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the will, the email, the years of manipulation. When I finished, he was quiet for a few seconds before saying, "Send me everything you have. Photos, dates, any proof of the original will." I'll check the property records first thing in the morning. Thank you, I whispered, feeling my throat tighten. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. If they forged documents, this could get ugly. When the call ended, I sat back in my chair, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the laptop screen. I wasn't sure if I was ready for ugly, but I was tired of being powerless. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Grandpa's voice, gentle and steady. Never let them build over your truth, Jaybird. I got up, pulled out my sketchpad, and began to draw. Not buildings this time, but the house on Maple Hill just as I remembered it. The oak tree, the porch swing, the windows that glowed with warmth. My hand trembled as I drew, but by the time I finished, something inside me had settled. If they wanted to erase me, they'd picked the wrong architect. Because I was about to rebuild my life from the ground up, and this time I'd make sure they couldn't destroy it again. The next morning, I woke up to Mason's text. Check the records, something's off, call me. My stomach dropped. I called immediately, pacing around my apartment while the coffee brewed. Mason picked up on the first ring, his voice low, cautious. Jaylene, your instincts were right. The property transfer on Maple Hill was filed under the Goodwin Family Trust, authorized by your father as trustee, but the name on the beneficiary line changed 2 months ago. Changed? I repeated. Yeah, he sighed. It used to list you as the sole inheritor. Now it names Clara Goodwin. I felt the world tilt. That's not possible. Legally, it shouldn't be, he said, but the signature on the amendment looks authentic. Jaylene, whoever did this, my father, I whispered. It's his handwriting. He used to sign all my report cards like that. I'd know it anywhere. Mason hesitated. If that's true, we might be dealing with forgery. I can pull archived copies of the trust documents, but it'll take time. Do it, I said, voice steady even as my hands shook. I'll find everything I can on my end. After the call, I stood by the window, staring out at the rain again. It hadn't stopped for days. The Oregon sky always felt heavy, like it knew too many secrets. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out an old photo. Grandpa and me on the porch, covered in sawdust and laughter. Behind us, Clara was sitting inside by the window, pretending to read but watching us with that same distant look she always had, half jealousy, half superiority. Grandpa used to say, "That girl's got charm but not warmth." I laughed bitterly. He'd been right about that too. By noon, I was knee-deep in old files, bank statements, tax reports, letters my mother had sent me during college. I was searching for something, even if I didn't know what. Halfway through, I found an old envelope marked for Jaylene from Dad. It was from 5 years ago, unopened. I ripped it open. Inside was a check for $500 and a note in his neat handwriting. Try to make something of yourself. Maybe then we'll have less to be embarrassed about. The paper trembled between my fingers. All those years I told myself he just didn't know how to show love. It was easier than admitting he didn't have any to give. I tossed the check into the trash. The sound of it hitting the bin was louder than it should have been. That afternoon, Mason called again. Jay, I think you should come to the records office with me tomorrow. There's a notary signature on the trust amendment that doesn't match the others. If it's fake, we'll need to prove it in person. I'll be there, I said. Thank you, he hesitated. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm not giving up this time. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything: Dad's face, Mom's silence, Clara's smugness. Maybe I'd been naive all along. Maybe I was the only one who thought family still meant something. Around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't dig into things that don't concern you. No name, no clue, just that. My heart pounded. I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. I stared at the screen for a full minute before turning the phone face down. My apartment suddenly felt smaller, colder. For the first time, I locked every door and window. The next day, I met Mason at the records office downtown. The clerk was a bored-looking woman with coffee stains on her sleeve, flipping through digital archives. Here it is, she said. Trust revision filed September 14th, 2024. Mason leaned in beside me, scrolling through the PDF on the screen. My heart stopped when I saw it, my grandfather's signature, real and firm, right above the line that said beneficiary, Jaylene Goodwin. Below that, another page dated 3 years later, showing an amendment with Clara's name and my father's signature approving it. I stared at the date. He filed this 2 weeks after Grandpa died. Mason's brow furrowed. That's illegal. The trustee can't alter a will post-mortem unless there's a legal clause allowing modification, which there is. So he forged it. Mason nodded grimly. Looks like it. I felt sick. My own father had stolen what was rightfully mine, rewriting history like I never existed. As we left the office, Mason asked softly, "Do you want me to confront them?" I shook my head. "No, if they went this far, they'll deny everything. I'll handle it my way." We stopped at a red light, and Mason looked at me carefully. "Your way sounds dangerous." "Maybe," I said, staring out at the gray drizzle. "But so is silence." When I got home, I found an old voicemail waiting, one I'd somehow missed. It was my mom's voice, shaky and quiet. "Jaylene, your father doesn't want you involved in the estate. Please just let it go. It's better for everyone." My throat tightened. Better for everyone. Everyone but me. I replayed it 3 times before deleting it. Something inside me snapped that night, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, surgical one. The kind that cuts clean and deep. I went to my closet and pulled out an old shoebox filled with photos, receipts, even napkins from the diner where Grandpa used to take me. Buried under it all was a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen in years, a note he'd left in his workshop the summer before he died. "Truth always leaves a trace. Find it, and it'll set you free." I stared at those words for a long time, my chest tight but steady. Then I whispered to myself, "Okay, Grandpa, let's find it." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with Grandpa's note spread out in front of me, the ink faded but the message still sharp. "Truth always leaves a trace." I stared at those words until dawn, then packed my bag and drove to Maple Hill Lane. The Goodwin estate looked the same from the outside, perfect, controlled, suffocating. The grass was trimmed like it had never grown wild. The shutters were painted a sterile white, as if the house itself was forced to forget what warmth felt like. I parked down the street and just sat there, watching. Through the kitchen window, I saw Mom moving around, pouring coffee. She looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe guilt does that to people. I hadn't planned on going inside, but my hands were already on the car door handle before I could talk myself out of it. I walked up the path I'd memorized as a child, my shoes crunching softly on gravel. When Mom opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Jaylene?" "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Your father isn't home." "That's why I came," she sighed, stepping aside. "You shouldn't be here." Inside, everything looked the same, the family portraits, the crystal vase, the heavy silence. It was like walking into a museum of memories I no longer owned. "I got an email," I began, "about the house. Maple Hill is being sold." Her hands trembled as she set the coffee pot down. "Your father, he thought it was best. We can't maintain that place anymore." "That's not his call," I said sharply. "Grandpa left it to me." Her eyes flickered with something, fear maybe. "Jaylene, you don't understand?" "No, Mom, you don't understand. He changed the documents. He forged my name off the will, and Clara's selling what doesn't belong to her." For a second, she looked like she might cry. Then she whispered, "Please don't do this. You don't know what you're getting into." "Then tell me," I said quietly. She didn't. She just shook her head, tears forming but never falling. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted everything. But instead, I just walked past her into Dad's study. It smelled like cigars and old paper. I remembered sitting here as a kid, watching him work, pretending I mattered. Now I was looking for proof he'd erased me. I searched the drawers, insurance papers, property deeds, receipts, all too clean, until I found a small envelope tucked beneath a false bottom. Inside were photocopies of banking forms. One caught my eye, an account labeled JG Beneficiary. The owner name was blacked out, but the initial deposit came from Grandpa's personal account, dated a week before he died. My pulse spiked. JG, Jaylene Goodwin. It wasn't much, but it was something, a trace. "Looking for something?" A voice snapped from the doorway. I froze. Clara. She stood there in her perfect business suit, hair pinned back, a half smirk on her face. "You never could mind your own business, could you?" I straightened. "You mean the business you stole?" She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "God, you sound so dramatic. Grandpa was old. He changed his mind, Jay. You weren't around. You moved away. You made your choice." "My choice." I hissed. "I chose not to be humiliated. That doesn't mean I chose to be erased." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You've always been so emotional. That's why Dad never trusted you with anything serious." I stepped closer. "Funny, considering I'm the only one who earned anything on my own." Her eyes flashed. "Careful, Jaylene, you don't want to start something you can't finish." "I already did," I said, "and you'll regret underestimating me." She held my stare for a beat, then turned to leave. "Dad will hear about this." "Good," I said. "He should." The door slammed behind her. My legs nearly gave out. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the papers. I stuffed them into my bag, heart pounding. When I got back to my car, I called Mason. "I found something," I said breathlessly. "A bank document. It mentions a beneficiary named J.G. That's me." "Send it," he said. If it's legit, we might be able to trace the account. I snapped a photo and sent it over. A minute later, he texted back, "Jaylene, this account was drained 3 years ago. The funds are gone." My chest tightened. "Gone by who?" He hesitated before replying. "Transfer originated from your father's signature, but it was confirmed by someone else, Clara." I sat in the car, staring at the message until my vision blurred. The betrayal burned through me like acid. They hadn't just taken my house, they'd stolen everything Grandpa meant for me. When I finally drove away, the rain turned heavier, blurring the road ahead. My reflection in the windshield looked like a stranger, eyes hollow, lips set in a thin line. That night, I spread all the papers on my kitchen table, piecing together what I had like parts of a crime scene. The will, the trust, the bank form, my mother's voicemail. Each one was a nail in the coffin of the family I thought I had. I realized something then. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about control. About punishing me for refusing to play my part in their perfect facade. I stared at the photo of Grandpa on my wall, the one where he's holding a blueprint and smiling like he still believed in the world. "I'm going to make this right," I whispered. "For you, for me." And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't eat that night. I couldn't. I just sat there at the kitchen table surrounded by piles of papers, coffee gone cold, my phone buzzing now, and then with messages I didn't want to read. Every document, every signature, every lie stared back at me like ghosts that refused to rest. The words blurred together until they almost made sense in a twisted way, my father's handwriting where it didn't belong, Clara's initials beside numbers that shouldn't exist. For years, I'd convinced myself I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too stubborn. But now I could see it clearly. I was their scapegoat. The one they could humiliate, silence, erase, while they hid behind the mask of the perfect Goodwin family. I thought about the little girl who used to sit on Grandpa's lap, learning how to draw straight lines, dreaming about the future. If she could see me now, broken, angry, betrayed, what would she say? Probably, finally. Finally, you see them for what they are. The clock hit midnight when Mason called again. His voice was low, careful. "Jay, I've been going over the files you sent. There's something strange. That JG account, there's a second routing code attached to it, but it's inactive. It could be a shell account." "What does that mean?" "It means the money didn't just disappear. It might have been moved somewhere else. Somewhere hidden." My heart raced. "Can we trace it?" "Not legally, not yet. But if you can get access to any of your father's recent transactions or Clara's business files, we'll know more. Just be careful, okay?" I thanked him, though my voice sounded far away. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the black laptop screen. The girl looking back at me didn't look scared anymore. She looked focused, cold, determined. The next morning, I drove to work early, pretending everything was normal. No one noticed how tight my jaw was or how long I stared at the blueprints on my desk. Architecture had always been about balance, angles, foundation, pressure. You remove one wrong pillar, and the whole structure collapses. Families are the same way. My father built his world on lies. All I had to do was find the right one to pull. At lunch, I texted Mason, "I'm going back to the house." He replied instantly, "Jay, not without someone there. I'll be fine." He didn't respond after that. Maybe he knew there was no stopping me. By sunset, I was standing in front of my parents' house again. The lights were on. Through the window, I saw Dad pacing, phone to his ear, voice raised. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read his body language, anger, fear, control slipping through his fingers. I waited until he left the room before walking around to the side door, the one that always stuck near the hinge. The same one Grandpa used when he came home late from the workshop. It still creaked when I pushed it open. The study smelled the same: leather, paper, old whiskey. My heart pounded as I rifled through drawers, scanning for anything with recent dates. Bills, contracts, receipts. Then there it was, a folder labeled Goodwin Development Holdings. My breath caught. I flipped through the pages until I found a ledger showing wire transfers to a company I'd never heard of, JG & Co. Restoration Fund. I froze, my initials. The payments were large and regular, stretching back 2 years. The signatures varied, sometimes my father's, sometimes Clara's. Every transfer marked as maintenance expense. Maintenance for what? A noise outside made me flinch. I shoved the folder into my bag and slipped out the door, my pulse hammering. As I backed out of the driveway, headlights flashed behind me. For a moment I thought it was them, but it was just a neighbor pulling in. Still, my hands shook all the way home. When I got inside, I locked the door and opened the folder again. The transfers went to a regional bank account under a different city, Salem. The name on the receiving end was redacted, but the initials were the same. JG Grandpa's signature appeared on one of the earliest documents, dated only a month before he died. He'd known. He'd hidden something maybe for me. I called Mason. I found something. A shell company called JG & Co. It's tied to my father's business. Send me everything, he said immediately. This could be big. I scanned the papers, sent them over, and waited. When he called back, his tone had changed. Jaylene, this isn't a shell. It's a holding company registered under your grandfather's name, and guess what? It still exists. He left you something that your father never declared. If we can prove that, it changes everything. My hands trembled. What did he leave? I don't know yet, but if your father knew about it, he's been hiding it. Whatever it is, Jaylene, it's yours. The call ended, but my heart wouldn't slow down. I stared at the rain streaking down the window, lightning flashing faintly in the distance. For the first time in years, the fear inside me was replaced with something sharper, stronger, purpose. I opened my sketchbook and began to draw again, but this time it wasn't a house. It was a blueprint of revenge, a design for justice, line by line. Every secret they'd buried would become a foundation for my return. Every lie they'd told would hold up the walls I was going to rebuild. And when the dust settled, they'd finally see the truth. They hadn't broken me. They'd built me. The morning after I found the hidden company file, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in control anymore. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I had direction. The house was silent except for the soft hum of my laptop as I opened every document Mason had sent me overnight. Bank records, property maps, even an old letterhead that read JG & Co. Restoration Fund. The name almost glowed on the screen. Grandpa's handwriting was faint in one corner of the scanned page, a signature I knew by heart. He'd left something for me, something they couldn't erase. By 9 a.m., Mason called. I have news, he said. I traced the holding company. It's technically still active, even though no one's touched it since your grandfather's death. Guess who's listed as the original beneficiary? Don't make me guess, I said, though my chest was already tightening. You, he said simply. You, Jaylene. And your father never filed a death or ownership transfer notice, which means, technically, you're still the legal beneficiary. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I laughed, half in disbelief. You're telling me I own a company I didn't even know existed? Yes, Mason said. And if the assets connected to it are still valid, there could be property, accounts, hell, maybe even investments. It's possible your grandfather set this up to protect something. My voice dropped. To protect it from my father. Exactly. I sank back into my chair, pressing a hand against my mouth. The edges of my anger began to sharpen into focus. Grandpa must have known what my father would do. He'd known his greed, his obsession with control. So he'd hidden something for me, something he trusted I'd one day find. What do we do now? I asked. I'll need you to sign a retrieval request, Mason said. Once it's filed, your family will be notified that someone accessed the trust. You'll lose the element of surprise, but let them know, I interrupted. Let them panic. He hesitated. You sure? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It's time they remember I exist. After hanging up, I stared at the reflection of myself in the laptop screen again. There was a steadiness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was building something, and I knew exactly where to start. That afternoon, I drove to the university archive where Grandpa had donated some of his architectural work years ago. The clerk, an elderly man with kind eyes, remembered him. Old Mr. Goodwin, he said, smiling, always carried that leather sketchbook. We still have a few of his restoration blueprints in the back, if your family. I hesitated only a second before saying, I'm his granddaughter. He led me into a room lined with rows of storage boxes. The smell of dust and paper filled the air, and for a moment I felt like I was walking through time itself. He handed me a folder labeled Goodwin Private Collection, Restricted. Inside were sketches of old homes, restoration projects across Oregon, and tucked between them, a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled. This was in his donated files? The clerk nodded. Found it during cataloging a few years back. We tried contacting the Goodwin family, but no one responded. Of course they hadn't. They probably destroyed every letter with my name on it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short note in Grandpa's handwriting. If you're reading this, Jaybird, they've taken what's yours. But remember, the foundation always tells the truth. Look beneath what they built. Beneath what they built. I reread it 3 times. Was it metaphorical or literal? Then I noticed a small key taped inside the envelope, with the number 212 etched on it, the address of the Maple Hill house. My heart raced. He'd hidden something in the house. I left the archive clutching the key like it was life itself. When I got to my car, I called Mason again. He left me a key for the Maple Hill house. He exhaled slowly. Jaylene, be careful. If they're trying to sell it, someone might already be there. I don't care, I said. I need to know what he hid. That evening, I drove to Maple Hill just before sunset. The for sale sign still stood on the lawn, leaning slightly to the side, like it was ashamed to be there. The house loomed in the fading light, quiet and ghostly. I slipped through the side gate and around to the basement door. My key shook in my hand as I slid it into the lock. It turned easily, as if it had been waiting for me. The basement smelled of dust, wood, and time. My flashlight swept across shelves filled with paint cans and old tools. On one wall, I saw faint pencil markings, blueprint lines. He'd drawn on the wall itself. My breath caught as I traced the outlines with my fingers, measurements, foundation grids, a small rectangle marked with an X near the corner. The foundation always tells the truth. I knelt by the marked spot and tapped the floor, hollow. My heart pounded. I grabbed a nearby wrench and pried open the small wooden panel. Inside was a metal box, rusted and heavy. When I opened it, I found a stack of papers, old bank ledgers, title deeds, a flash drive, and a faded photograph of Grandpa standing with another man I didn't recognize. On the back of the photo, a note, "He knows the rest." Who? I shoved everything into my bag, closed the panel, and hurried upstairs. But when I reached the back door, I froze. A car had pulled into the driveway. The headlights cut through the darkness. Clara. She was on the phone, pacing beside her car, her voice sharp and impatient. "I told you I'd handle it. She won't find anything. She's useless." My hands clenched around the strap of my bag. My heart raced, but this time it wasn't fear, it was fury. I stepped back into the shadows, waiting until she walked around to the front porch. Then I slipped out the side, quiet as the rain. When I finally got home, I locked the door and dumped the box contents onto my desk. There were documents tracing back over 15 years, projects Grandpa had financed, properties restored under J.G. & Co., but one file stood out. Goodwin Holdings Trust Transfer Proposal Unapproved. It listed my father's name beside a note that said, "Proposed amendment denied by AG, AG the same initials from the photo." Whoever AG was, they'd stopped my father once before. Maybe they could again. I took a deep breath, staring at the mess of evidence spread before me. My grandfather had left me a trail, and my family had no idea I was following it. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift, not completely, not yet, but enough to breathe. When I finally crawled into bed that night, the rain had stopped. The world outside was silent, waiting. And for the first time since my father called me a disgrace, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. Morning came with a gray sky and the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to break. My apartment looked like a detective's office, papers spread across the floor, photos pinned to corkboards, sticky notes crammed with arrows and questions. The letters AG stared back at me from the center of it all. Who the hell was AG? I opened the flash drive I'd found in the metal box. It was encrypted, of course. Grandpa had been careful, but not careless. I tried every password I could think of, birthdays, addresses, even old project names, but nothing worked. Finally, I typed Jaybird, the nickname only he used for me. The screen flickered, then opened. My heart skipped a beat. The drive held folders labeled by year, 2003, 2007, 2011, 2019. Each contained photos, invoices, and contracts linked to J.G. & Co., but one folder stood out, A.G., Correspondence. Inside were scanned letters between Grandpa and someone named Arthur Grant, an independent auditor and legal consultant. The emails painted a story. My father had tried to absorb J.G. & Co. into his own business long before Grandpa's death, falsifying numbers and using Clara's signature to hide transfers. Arthur Grant had discovered it and stopped him by filing a legal injunction. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Arthur had saved the company once. Maybe he could help me now. I searched his name online, and within minutes I found him, retired, living in Portland. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys and drove 2 hours through the mist and pine forests, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached. His house was small, tucked behind a line of fir trees. When he opened the door, he looked exactly how I imagined, white hair, thick glasses, and the kind of eyes that had seen too much but still missed nothing. "Mr. Grant," I said, "I'm Jaylene Goodwin. You worked with my grandfather." He blinked, then nodded slowly. "Jaylene, yes, I remember you. You were the girl who used to draw with him in the workshop." I felt a lump in my throat. That was me. He gestured for me to come inside. The living room smelled like old books and cedar. Files were stacked everywhere, a lifetime of paper and truth. "I found something," I said, pulling the envelope from my bag, A letter, a flash drive. He mentioned you. I think my father forged the will after he died. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. I was afraid of that. After your grandfather passed, your father tried to pressure me into signing off on document revisions. I refused. I thought he'd given up. He didn't, I said bitterly. He erased me from everything. Arthur's eyes softened. He never could stand that your grandfather trusted you more than him. That house, that company, it was all meant to be yours. You were supposed to inherit the foundation he built, not just the property. I swallowed hard. He said something in his letter, the foundation always tells the truth. What did he mean? Arthur smiled faintly. Your grandfather loved metaphors, but with him they were never just words. He used to say every structure has a hidden core, a record of its maker. If you want the truth, look at what's beneath the surface. I showed him the papers, the account statements, the signatures. He studied them quietly, then said, "These are enough to open an inquiry." But Jaylene, if you do this, it won't be private. Your family will know, it'll be public ugly. I don't care, I said. They already made it ugly. He nodded slowly. Then I'll help you. We spent the rest of the afternoon cross-checking the bank ledgers. Arthur pointed out details I hadn't noticed, discrepancies, backdated signatures, duplicate transfers. He agreed to draft a report to submit to the state's fraud division. Before I left, he handed me a folder. You might need this too, he said. Your grandfather's notarized letter. It's not a will, but it verifies your authority over JG and Co. He asked me to keep it safe in case. Well, in case this ever happened. I took it, holding it like something sacred. Thank you. Driving back, I felt lighter than I had in months. For once, I wasn't chasing ghosts, I had proof. But when I got home, the front door was slightly open. I froze, my heart hammered in my chest. I stepped inside carefully, scanning the room. My papers were scattered across the floor, drawers half open. Someone had been here. On my desk, a single sheet of paper sat neatly on top of the mess, my father's handwriting. Stop digging, Jaylene, you won't like what you find. I felt the blood drain from my face. He knew. I grabbed my phone, but before I could call Mason, it rang, unknown number. Against every instinct, I answered. Do you have any idea what you're doing? It was Clara's voice, calm and cold. You broke into my house, I said. You're lucky that's all we did. You're playing a dangerous game, Jaylene. I learned from the best, I snapped. Funny, isn't it, how you all lied for so long and still think you can control me? You're embarrassing yourself, she said sharply. And when this blows up, you'll wish you stayed quiet. Then let it blow, I said and hung up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't cry, not this time. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, then called Mason. They know, I said. He cursed under his breath. Pack a bag, you can stay at my place tonight. We'll make the report public in the morning. I hesitated. If we do that, they'll lose everything. Good, he said. They deserve to. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about punishment. It was about truth, and truth never came without pain. That night, I slept on Mason's couch, surrounded by files and empty coffee cups. I dreamed of the house again, Grandpa's voice echoing through the walls, the smell of sawdust, the sound of rain on the roof. I woke up at 3 a.m. with a single thought running through my head. There was still more buried under that foundation. The next morning, Mason and I filed the report. It took hours, signatures, and scanned documents, but once it was done, there was no going back. By noon, I got the first call from my mother. Jaylene, what have you done? Her voice cracked between anger and fear. What I had to, I said. They're investigating your father, you've destroyed us. I didn't destroy anything, Mom, I just stopped pretending. There was silence, then a soft sob. You've always been cruel, Jaylene. I closed my eyes. No, Mom, I've just finally stopped being quiet. I hung up before she could say anything else. By evening, the story had already started spreading. A small financial blog picked up the investigation, then a local news outlet. Goodwin Development faces allegations of inheritance fraud. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, unknown numbers, voicemails from Clara, even one from Dad, his tone furious. You've made a mistake, Jaylene, he growled in the message. You think you're untouchable, you're not. But his voice didn't scare me anymore. It only fueled me. I stepped out onto the balcony, the wind cold against my face. Below, the city lights shimmered like a reflection of everything I'd lost and everything I was taking back. For years, they told me I was a disgrace, a mistake. But now the world was finally seeing who the real frauds were, and I was just getting started. The news spread faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, the Goodwin name, once synonymous with prestige and success, was plastered across local headlines. Inheritance fraud, illegal trust transfers, and corporate misconduct allegations. Every word felt like a small crack in the glass fortress my father had built around himself. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. But visibility came with a price. By the third day, I was called unstable in a press release my father's attorney issued. A disgruntled family member making baseless accusations. It didn't even surprise me. The Goodwins had always been masters at rewriting the story. Mason told me to stay off social media, but I couldn't. I read every headline, every comment, every lie. My father's face appeared on TV interviews, calm and polished as always, saying things like, "We love our daughter, but she's unwell. We hope she finds peace." Peace. The word made me laugh out loud, bitter and tired. They stolen everything, and now they wanted to brand me as crazy for telling the truth. Mason showed up at my apartment with takeout and a folder under his arm. "Ignore them," he said. "They're trying to control the narrative." "But we just got something." "What is it?" He spread the documents out across my coffee table, bank statements, offshore transfers, multiple shell companies under different names. "Your father's been moving money through something called Alder Incorporated for years. Guess where it leads?" I leaned closer. "Don't tell me." "JG and Co., he said, tapping the page. "He used your grandfather's fund to launder corporate money. That's why he forged the trust. He wasn't just taking your inheritance, he was covering his tracks." I stared at the papers, my pulse rising. "If we can prove that, we can ruin him," Mason finished. "Completely." My throat went dry. The thought of destroying him wasn't satisfying, it was terrifying. Because once it started, there was no going back. That night, while Mason compiled the evidence, I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. My mind wandered back to Grandpa's house, to the way the air always smelled like cedar and coffee. I remembered the stories he used to tell me about integrity, about building something honest in a crooked world. And I realized something. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction. The next morning, Mason called me from his office. "Jay, something weird happened. Someone tried to access the investigation files from my email." "What?" "I traced the IP address. It's coming from your father's law firm." The words hit like a punch. "He's watching us." "He's trying to stop you," Mason said, "but I'm encrypting everything, don't worry." I laughed dryly. "That's easy for you to say. You don't have your own family breaking into your life." He hesitated. "Jay, maybe you should leave town for a while, lay low." "Run?" I asked. "No, not this time." Later that day, I got a message from an unknown number again. This time it wasn't a threat, it was a video. My hands shook as I opened it. The footage showed me leaving Arthur Grant's house, looking nervous. The text below it said, "Meeting with your grandfather's accomplice, interesting move." They were following me. I called Mason immediately. "They're watching me. I got a video, someone filmed me at Arthur's." He swore quietly. "Jesus, Jaylene, okay listen, don't go anywhere alone, we'll handle this legally." I almost laughed. "Legally, we're past that." That night, I went through the files again. Every number, every signature blurred together until one detail stopped me cold. A file from Arthur labeled personal copy, confidential. I hadn't opened it before. Inside was a scan of a handwritten note dated 2 months before Grandpa's death. It wasn't from him, it was from Arthur himself. "If anything happens to me or to JG and Co., the documents are secured under the Foundation's second registry. Code reference, Blueprint 12. Only the architect will know where to look." Only the architect. I reread the line over and over, my heart racing. The architect, me. I grabbed the folder of Grandpa's blueprints, spreading them across the floor. The edges were worn, some yellowed from age. I traced each line with my finger, remembering how he used to hum when he drew. Most of the plans were for Maple Hill renovations, but one blueprint, the most recent, was different. At the bottom corner, tiny numbers were written in faint ink, 12/BL Blueprint 12. I stared at the sketch. It showed the house foundation and beneath it a secondary chamber, something never built or hidden after construction. A note scribbled next to it read, "Final ledger below core beam, for her, for her." The realization hit me like a wave. There was still something in that house, something Grandpa left behind. I called Mason immediately. "I found something." "There's another hidden compartment in the foundation of the Maple Hill house." He exhaled. "Jay, that's risky. The property's still under legal freeze. If you get caught, then I'll tell them I'm inspecting what's mine," I said. "I have to know what's in there." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Okay, but I'm coming with you." We drove out to the property at dusk. The air was cold and damp, the kind that seeps into your bones. The for sale sign was gone now, replaced by a notice of pending legal review. The house stood silent, windows dark. Mason brought tools, I brought the blueprint. We found the marked spot under the main support beam in the basement. It took an hour to loosen the cement tiles, and when we finally did, a hollow echo answered back. Mason knelt beside me, prying open a small metal compartment. Inside was a leather-bound notebook and a sealed envelope. He handed them to me carefully. "This is it." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Grandpa's neat script. "If they've taken what's yours, let the truth build its own walls. The numbers you need are in the ledger. And Jaylene, trust no one who comes offering help, they may already belong to him." I looked up at Mason. For a second, I didn't say anything. Then I asked quietly, "Do you think he meant my father?" "Probably," Mason said, his face unreadable. But as I studied him, something shifted inside me. The way he avoided my eyes, the tension in his jaw, a flicker of doubt. We left the house in silence. When we got to my car, he turned to me. "Keep the notebook with you. Don't send copies to anyone, not even me. Too risky." I nodded, but part of me wondered if that was advice or warning. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, staring at the ledger. Every line of it was coded, numbers, initials, dates. At the bottom of the last page, a single line stood out. "Alder transfer unauthorized, handled internally. Confirmed by MR, my blood ran cold. MR Mason Reed." I dropped the pen, my breath catching. He'd known, he'd been part of it. The realization hit like a knife twisting in my chest. The one person I'd trusted completely, the one who'd promised to help me, had been part of the very scheme that destroyed me. I closed the notebook slowly, my mind racing. The rain started again outside, hitting the windows like angry fingertips. My reflection in the glass looked pale, shaken, but there was something else there too, a new kind of calm. I whispered to myself, "All right then, let's finish this." I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the notebook, that cursed line burning into my eyes. "Alder transfer unauthorized, handled internally. Confirmed by MR Mason Reed." The name I had said 100 times in gratitude, in trust, in desperation. Now it felt poisonous. I replayed every conversation we'd had. The times he'd told me to stay calm. The warnings to be careful. The files he'd said he couldn't share yet. I'd mistaken his caution for protection, but it was control. He hadn't been helping me. He'd been managing me, keeping me close, keeping tabs. By morning, I was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of disbelief curdling into fury. At 7:42 a.m., he texted, "You okay?" I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then I typed, "Meet me, 9 a.m. at the cafe near the river." He replied instantly, "On my way." The cafe was nearly empty when I got there. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the water, gray and heavy. Mason walked in, wearing that same calm smile that once made me feel safe. I watched him order his coffee, watched how easy it all seemed for him. "How practiced." "Jay," he said as he sat down, "you look like you haven't slept." "Hard to sleep when you realize your whole life is built on lies," I said, keeping my voice even. He frowned slightly. "You mean your father, I mean you." He froze. "What?" I slid the ledger across the table. His eyes dropped to the page, then back to me. "Alder transfer unauthorized, handled internally. Confirmed by MR, I said slowly. "That's you, isn't it?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the page. Then he leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Jaylene, listen." "No," I cut him off. "You listen. You stood in my living room, told me you believed me, told me you were helping me, and all this time you were part of it." "It's not what you think," he said quietly. "I wasn't part of it, I was cleaning it up." "Cleaning up?" I laughed bitterly. "You laundered my grandfather's money through my father's company, Mason. You helped them steal from me." He looked genuinely pained, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or performance. "Your grandfather trusted me, Jay. He asked me to protect what was left when your father started moving funds. I did what I had to do to keep it hidden until you were ready." My voice shook. "And I'm just supposed to believe that?" "Everything I've done was to keep your inheritance from disappearing completely," he said. "Your father threatened me. I had to make it look like I was on his side." "You think I liked watching him ruin everything?" I searched his face for truth, but all I saw were half answers and practiced calm. I didn't know if he was telling me the truth or feeding me another lie. "Give me one reason," I said finally, "not to turn this ledger over to the police right now." He hesitated, then said softly, "Because if you do, your father wins. You'll be dragged through hell in court, they'll bury you under their lawyers, and you'll never see a cent of what's yours. I can help you finish this, but only if you trust me." I looked at him for a long moment. "I did trust you. Then do it one more time." The words made me feel sick. I stood up, grabbed the ledger, and walked out without another word. He didn't try to stop me. That scared me more than anything. Outside, the wind was cold and sharp. I leaned against my car, shaking. Every instinct screamed that Mason was dangerous, but part of me knew I still needed him. If he really was double-playing my father, he was my only access to their system. That afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, emails, messages from reporters. The story had exploded. The Goodwins were officially under investigation. My father had been photographed leaving a courthouse, his expression hard and silent. Clara stood beside him, perfectly dressed, pretending composure. But the real blow came that evening. A journalist posted a leaked document from the Goodwin family's lawyer. Attached was an affidavit claiming I'd forged my grandfather's signature years ago to gain access to confidential assets. My name trended online within hours. Goodwin heiress falsified documents. I stared at the screen, numb. They were flipping the script again. Mason called. I didn't answer. He texted, "Jay, they're trying to discredit you. Stay quiet, don't post anything." I threw my phone onto the couch. How convenient for him to say that now. I spent the night going through Grandpa's notebook again, searching for anything that could prove the ledger's authenticity. Near the back, I found a second layer of pages glued together. I carefully peeled them apart and found a small folded note, written in the same faded ink. "Trust the structure, not the builder. Truth will reveal itself in collapse." It hit me like lightning. Grandpa had hidden clues everywhere, in metaphors, in drawings, even in his own handwriting. The structure wasn't just about buildings. It was about systems. Financial structures, the companies, the trusts. If they collapsed, the truth would come out. I opened my laptop and began tracing every connection between Alder Incorporated and JG & Co., following money trails through every transfer Mason had shown me. By midnight, I'd found something Mason never mentioned, a transfer from Alder to an offshore account under his name. The same week he told me he couldn't access my father's files. Betrayal was complete. I sat there shaking, every nerve on fire. Then, without thinking, I opened my messages and typed, "You lied." He replied immediately, "Jay, please, you don't understand." Then explain. A few seconds passed, then, "Meet me tonight. The truth is bigger than both of us." I stared at the message for a long time. Every rational thought told me not to go, but my heart, it wanted answers. I drove to the meeting spot he sent, an empty parking lot near the old railway station. Rain slicked the asphalt, reflecting the yellow glow of streetlights. Mason stood there, hands in his coat pockets, face pale in the cold. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said softly. "I don't trust anyone else," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good, then listen. Your father isn't just hiding money, he's laundering political donations through JG & Co. It's not just family fraud, Jay. It's criminal, federal level. If you go public without the full proof, they'll bury you for obstruction." That's why I kept quiet. "Then why is your name on the transfers?" I asked. "Because I signed them under duress," he said. "I was working undercover with the Financial Crimes Division." I stared at him, speechless. "That's impossible." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can prove it, but you have to trust me long enough to end this. If you release that ledger now, you'll burn both of us and your grandfather's name with it." The wind howled between us, sharp and cold. "How do I know you're not lying?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes tired, almost sad. "Because if I were, you'd already be dead." My stomach dropped. He turned to leave, slipping a small flash drive into my coat pocket. "That's everything you need. Don't open it until you're ready." "Mason," but he was already walking into the dark, his figure disappearing into the mist. When I got home, I locked the door and sat on the floor, shaking. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, staring at it. I didn't plug it in. Not yet. I couldn't. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family war. It was something bigger, darker, something my grandfather might have died protecting me from. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and I whispered to the empty room, "You were right, Grandpa. The foundation is cracking." And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what would come out when it fell apart. The flash drive sat on my kitchen table for hours. I made coffee, paced, stared at it, picked it up, set it down again. It felt like it was pulsing, like it had its own heartbeat, waiting for me to break it open. Every instinct screamed that whatever was inside would change everything. When I finally plugged it in, the screen flickered, then went black. A password box appeared. My hands shook as I typed the first thing that came to mind, Jaybird. Access granted. Inside were dozens of files, emails, transaction logs, meeting notes, even voice recordings. A folder labeled Operation Blueprint caught my eye. I clicked it, and Mason's voice came through my speakers. "If you're hearing this, Jaylene, it means you opened the drive. You probably hate me right now, and you should. I wasn't honest. But I never lied about one thing. I've been trying to protect you." I froze. The sound of his voice was calm, but there was strain beneath it. "Your father isn't just committing fraud. He's been laundering political money through Goodwin Development for over a decade. JG & Co. was used as the clean front for donations tied to construction permits and land grants. Your grandfather found out. He tried to expose it quietly, but someone silenced him before he could. My throat tightened. No, I whispered. I was working with the federal division back then. We had a case open under Operation Blueprint, but when your grandfather died, the case was buried. Someone high up made it disappear. Your father's connections go farther than you think. That's why I stayed close to gather evidence from the inside. The file ended. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the fridge. Then I opened the next folder, Audio Logs Goodwin. There were half a dozen recordings, dated between 2018 and 2020. I played the most recent one. Dad's voice, no one touches that account until the contract's clear. I don't care what Arthur thinks. He had his chance. Clara and Jaylene, what if she finds out? Dad, she won't. She's too soft, always was. My vision blurred. I slammed the laptop shut. My body shook with anger at the lies, the manipulation, the cruelty disguised as family. For a second, I almost wanted to scream. But then I remembered Grandpa's words, trust the structure, not the builder. If Mason was telling the truth, then the system, the case, the documentation was the structure. And maybe, just maybe, I could make it collapse on its own. I reopened the laptop and began sorting the files, organizing everything by timeline. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. There were invoices linked to government projects that didn't exist, cash payments to anonymous campaign donors, and a hidden account under AG Trust Holdings, Arthur Grant's name. But the signature wasn't his. It was my father's forged. That's when it hit me. Grandpa hadn't been protecting himself. He'd been protecting Arthur. The AG code wasn't a partner, it was a shield, a diversion to keep Arthur safe while hiding evidence somewhere else. There was one final file at the bottom of the drive, Video 0419, MP4. I hesitated before clicking play. The footage was grainy, the camera pointed at a workshop I recognized immediately, Grandpa's. He stood at the table, older and thinner than I remembered, speaking to someone just out of frame. If they find out, they'll destroy her, he said quietly. Arthur's voice replied, then she needs to know the truth, Walter. You can't protect her forever. Grandpa looked straight into the camera. His eyes were soft, sad. Jaylene, if you ever see this, it means I failed. I tried to build something honest in a world that rewards liars, but I left you the truth piece by piece. Don't use it for revenge. Use it to rebuild. The video ended there, leaving me in tears. I sat in silence for a long time. Every part of me wanted to burn everything my father had touched. But Grandpa's voice wouldn't leave my head, use it to rebuild. Maybe that was the difference between him and me. He built, my father destroyed. When the phone rang, I jumped. Unknown number again. Against better judgment, I answered. Jaylene Goodwin? A man's voice asked. This is Agent Hall from the Financial Crimes Division. We received new evidence connected to Operation Blueprint. Are you safe right now? My breath caught. How did you get this number? We were contacted by Mason Reed, he said. He's been working with us undercover. He wanted to make sure you weren't targeted. We have a warrant out for your father's arrest. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. What about Mason? A pause. He's gone dark. We lost contact with him 48 hours ago. The line went dead before I could say anything else. I sat there, shaking. If Mason really was an undercover agent, that meant everything, his lies, his distance, his secrecy, had been part of the act. But it also meant he might be in danger because of me. My mind raced. The files, the ledger, everything I had was now evidence in a federal investigation. If my father realized Mason flipped, he'd come for both of us. That night, I packed a small bag and left my apartment, driving with no destination. Every mile away from that house felt both freeing and terrifying. The headlights stretched across empty roads, reflecting off the rain-soaked pavement. Somewhere behind me, the Goodwin empire was cracking piece by piece. At a rest stop, I parked and sat in the car, staring at the flash drive in my hand. I thought about Grandpa's words about Mason's warning. I wasn't sure who to trust anymore, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about legacy. And I wasn't going to let the Goodwin name end in corruption. I drove through the night until I reached the coast. The ocean was violent, roaring against the cliffs, but it made me feel small in a way that was comforting. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. In the early morning light, I opened my laptop one last time and uploaded everything, every file, every recording, every video to an encrypted public database. I didn't attach my name. I didn't need to. The truth would speak louder than I ever could. When I hit send, I whispered to the waves, it's done. My phone buzzed once more, an unknown number again. I hesitated, then answered. "Jaylene," the voice said softly. "Mason, you did it. Mason, where are you? Somewhere safe. You need to disappear for a while. Let the truth run its course." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "You should have told me everything." "I couldn't," he said. "If I did, they would have come for you first." Silence stretched between us. Then he said quietly, "Your grandfather was right about you. You're stronger than you think." Before I could reply, the line went dead. I sat there in the car, waves crashing below, sun rising through the mist. My heart hurt, but it was steady. The world would finally see who the Goodwins really were, not the smiling family in holiday photos, but the cracks beneath the perfect walls. And maybe someday, when the dust settled, I'd build something new from the ruins. When the truth finally came out, it didn't explode, it unfolded, like slow cracks through glass. For weeks, every news outlet dissected the Goodwin case: forged wills, offshore accounts, campaign fraud, shell companies built on lies. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. My father's mugshot appeared on television, his eyes hollow, his perfect smile gone. I didn't watch the trial. I couldn't. Every headline, every broadcast was like watching my own bloodline rot in real time. But I didn't feel satisfaction, just a quiet ache, like mourning someone who died years ago but you'd only just buried. Mom refused to testify. Clara did, but only after her own accounts were frozen. She cried on the stand, saying she'd been manipulated, that she never knew what Dad was doing. I believed part of it. She'd always been good at pretending not to know. The reporters called me the whistleblower daughter. They wanted interviews, photo ops, documentaries. I turned them all down. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a victim either. I was just tired. The authorities asked me to testify, and I did once, quietly behind closed doors. I handed them everything: the flash drive, the ledger, the video of Grandpa. When it was over, the lead investigator shook my hand and said, "You did the right thing." I walked out of that building into cold sunlight and didn't look back. For months, I lived quietly in a small rental house by the coast. The air tasted like salt and pine, and the sound of the waves at night reminded me of the hum Grandpa used to make when he drew. Sometimes I'd wake up thinking I heard his voice, calm, patient, saying, "Trust the structure." At first, I didn't know what that meant anymore. The Goodwin structure had collapsed. The family name was ashes. But one morning, while sketching designs in my notebook, I realized he wasn't talking about buildings or bloodlines. He was talking about me. I was the structure. And for the first time in years, I wanted to rebuild. I started a small architectural studio with 2 friends from my old firm. We worked out of a converted garage, designing sustainable homes for low-income families. No investors, no politics, no family name, just work that mattered. Every so often, a letter would arrive, no return address, just a typewritten note. The first one said, "Keep building, Jay. The truth always finds its shape." I knew it was Mason. I tried tracing the letters, but they always came from different cities. I never replied. Part of me wanted to see him again, part of me was afraid of what that would mean. He'd lived in the shadows too long, and I had finally stepped into the light. In late spring, I went back to the old Goodwin house for the first time. It had been repossessed, stripped of furniture, left cold and hollow. The paint peeled from the walls, the floors creaked, and the air smelled faintly of dust and rain. But in the silence, I could still hear echoes, laughter from old holidays, whispered fights behind closed doors, the sound of my name shouted in anger. I walked down to the basement where we'd found the hidden compartment. The concrete floor still bore the marks from when Mason and I pried it open. I knelt there, running my fingers across the cracks, and whispered, "It's over now, Grandpa." A soft breeze moved through the open window, stirring the dust. For a moment, it felt like the house exhaled. Like it had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for someone to finally tell the truth. Before I left, I nailed a small wooden plaque near the doorway, something I carved myself. It read, "The truth built this house. The lies tore it down. Driving away, I didn't look back. The house wasn't home anymore. It was history." The following week, I got another letter. This one was shorter than the rest. "Blueprint complete. Take care of yourself, Jaybird." I smiled through tears. It was the first time he'd called me that since the beginning. I never heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, Mason, watching from a distance, making sure I'm safe. Or maybe he disappeared for good, just like the people who live their whole lives between truth and lies always do. Either way, I hope he found peace. We both earned it. Now, when people ask about my family, I don't flinch. I tell them the truth. They taught me everything I never want to become. And when they ask what I do for a living, I tell them I build foundations, real ones that hold. Because that's what Grandpa wanted all along. Not revenge, not redemption, just strength built from honesty. And every time I stand on a new construction site, watching walls rise where there was once only rubble, I feel something like forgiveness. Not for them, but for myself. The day I stopped trying to fix the Goodwins was the day I finally became one worth remembering. It's been a year since everything fell apart. A year since the name Goodwin stopped meaning money and started meaning something real, truth, loss, and rebuilding. The ocean outside my window has become my clock. Each wave erases what came before, and yet somehow, it all adds up to something endless. I like that idea, that life can wash itself clean, one tide at a time. People still send me emails sometimes. Strangers who say my story gave them courage to speak up against their own families, their bosses, their abusers. I don't always reply, but I read every word. It reminds me that pain, when faced head-on, can ripple outward and become strength for someone else. One evening, I drove back to the hill behind the old Goodwin estate. The house had been sold, renovated, turned into something sleek and modern. New walls, new roof, new owners, no ghosts left. But I didn't go to see the house. I went to see the oak tree behind it. Grandpa had carved our initials there once. WG plus JG. The carving was faint now, half covered by moss, but it was still there. I sat beneath it, tracing the letters with my fingertips. For the first time, I spoke out loud to him. "You were right about everything," I whispered. "The foundation does tell the truth." It took me a while to hear it. The wind rustled the branches, and for a second I could almost hear his laugh, that low, patient sound that used to fill his workshop. I pulled out my sketchbook and began to draw. Not a building this time. A tree. The same one above me, its roots spreading deep underground, its trunk marked with scars that had healed into strength. Underneath it, I wrote, "Some things grow stronger when broken." When I finished, I sat there until sunset painted the world in gold. I thought about Mom, who'd moved away quietly after the trial. About Clara, who sent me a single text months ago that said, "I'm sorry, I hope you're okay." I never replied, but I didn't delete it either. Maybe one day I will. Maybe one day forgiveness won't feel so heavy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw someone standing near the road, a figure in a dark coat, hands in pockets. My heart skipped. The wind carried a familiar calm with it. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Maybe it was just the light, maybe not. I smiled anyway. Driving back along the coast, I rolled the windows down and let the salt air whip through my hair. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was simply living. When I got home, I hung my latest project on the wall, a blueprint drawn in clean, precise lines. It wasn't for a client, it was for me. A modest little home, filled with open light and wide windows. At the bottom corner, in fine pencil, I signed my name. Not the disgraced daughter, not the whistleblower, just me. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote something Grandpa used to say when we worked together: "Every beam needs balance." Back then, I thought he was just teaching me architecture. Now I knew he was teaching me how to live. Balance isn't about perfection. It's about knowing what to let go of and what to keep standing on. And for the first time, I had both feet on solid ground. The last thing I did before turning off the light was glance at the small wooden plaque I'd brought from the old house. I'd kept it, but changed the words. Now it read, I touched it lightly, whispering, "Good night, Grandpa." Outside, the wind howled through the pines, steady and sure, and for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreams.